Hi, I'm Bob Tabor with LearnVisualStudio.net. We're going to start off by writing just a tiny bit of HTML and JavaScript. Nothing fancy or complex at all. Just want to show you, first of all, where you can add JavaScript into your web pages. Secondly, just kind of get into the workflow of writing some code and then testing it in your web browser. And then finally, we want to talk about what to do when the JavaScript examples that we demonstrate in this series simply don't work and you don't know where to turn. There are some tools that are built into Internet Explorer that I want to demonstrate briefly to help you find clues so you can kind of solve your own problems. Of course, if you ever get stuck, please feel free, as we mentioned in the previous video, to ask questions in the comments and I'll try to answer them if I can. Alright, and then we're going to come back in the next lesson and we're going to take a look at the examples that we write here, and I'm going to explain what's going on behind the scenes in quite a bit more depth. Now, the code itself is going to be so simple that I am willing to bet that you're going to be able to figure this out on your own before we even run the example, and without any explanation from me whatsoever. But still, I think it's beneficial as we're getting started that we provide some background information to get you started on a solid foundation. All right, so our game plan in this lesson is to, first of all, set up a folder where we can save our work. We'll do that in just a moment. We're going to set up some shortcuts in our development environment, our Notepad, Internet Explorer development environment, and then we're going to create a template. We'll make sure that it validates against the HTML5 validator, and then we'll start writing some JavaScript code, okay? So here we go. Remember, and this is important, pause the video, rewind it if you need to, but do whatever you have to do to follow along closely, because to get the most benefit out of this series or any series or a book or what have you, you need to follow along and get your hands dirty and actually type the code out. It's the best way to learn, hands down, okay? All right, so as you can see, I'm starting off with a relatively fresh install of Windows 7, and I also have Internet Explorer 9.0 installed. However, what I'm about to show you is going to work regardless of the operating system that you have currently installed. It'll work with just about any version or vendor of web browser. But still, if you want to follow along closely, then I highly recommend that you at a minimum have the most recent version of Internet Explorer installed. All right, so let's start off by creating a folder where we're going to save our work, and you'll be able to download this and compare the code that you write versus the code that I write in case there's some discrepancy and you're not able to get the code example to work, okay? So we're going to right-click on the desktop and select New from the context menu, New Folder. I'm going to call this C9 for Channel 9, JS for JavaScript, and then underscore fundamentals. Okay. And then the next thing that I want to do to kind of set up my environment is to get into Notepad, and because in the past people have had some issues with viewing the code as we've typed it out, I'm going to change the font size. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to take this step of going to Format Font, and I'm going to change to a Courier New Bold 18. And so you should be able to see that. And if that's still garbled, then you probably want to download the video locally and watch it. It's made available in a high-def format, so you should be able to see it clearly if you were to download and watch it locally instead of streaming. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get started now. What I want to do is create a template so that we don't have to type in the same HTML5 code every single time that we want to create a web page to embed JavaScript into. So let's get started there. And nothing that I do here should blow you away. If you don't understand HTML, then you need to stop right now, and you may want to watch the HTML5 Fundamental series, also available on Channel 9, as soon as I finish recording it. Okay, so here we go. All right, and for this to validate, I need to have a title tag in the head. And we'll just call this JavaScript example. And then the body, I'm going to create a header. I don't have to do this to validate, but since this is our template, just want to create a little space consistent for every example where we can put the topic that's being discussed in that particular example. All right, so let me select File, Save As, and I want to go to the desktop and find that new folder we just created, the C9JS_fundamentals folder. And this is important. I want to change the Save As type from text documents, which is the default, to all files. Otherwise, whenever I go to save my my work, it's going to append a .txt file extension, and that'll prevent me from being able to double click on the file and open it up automatically by file association in Internet Explorer. So I want to make sure always to select all files and then type out the full name of the file. We'll just call this template.html. Template.html and click Save. If we were to open up our folder, we should be able to see it now in there. And I'm going to double click template.html and it should open it up in my web browser, and it does. Alright, so now I want to validate and make sure that I didn't type anything incorrectly, and I want to make sure that our template conforms to the HTML5 standard. Otherwise, I'm going to be fixing that problem every single time that I create a new example. So we can pick one of several different validators. My personal favorite is at html5.validator.nu. And in fact, I plan on using this so often in this series that I'm going to make it my home page. So I'm going to go to the Tools, Internet Options, Use Current, make sure that it lists html5.validator.nu and click OK. Alright, now what I want to do is go and change the validator input from an address to a text field, because I'm going to paste in this template code that I created. So I'm going to select it, copy it, then select the text there and delete all that, and then just hit Control V on my keyboard to paste in what I have, and then click the Validate button. And you should see the message, the document is valid, HTML5 plus area plus SVG, and so on. If you don't see that and you see some sort of an error message, a little pink or red box below where I'm seeing the green box, then you'll want to stop right now, rewind the video, and make sure that you have typed in the example exactly, precisely the way that I did. And I think that that's probably the first admonition that I'd give you as we get started, that software development, web development, is an exercise in preciseness. When we communicate in the English language, we rely on the person we're communicating to fill in the details. Perhaps we don't use proper speech, or as we're typing, we spell something slightly incorrectly, or we don't use the correct punctuation. As humans, we're able to figure that out, but as computers, it confuses them completely. So preciseness is the key, and when you're not precise, there are tools like the validator and some other things that we'll see a little bit later in this video that will help you find where the problem really is. All right, so let's go ahead and shut this down for now. And what we want to do is use this template to create our very first JavaScript example. So I want to change the file name here. I don't want to overwrite my template.html. I'm going to hit File, Save As, making sure to change the Save As type to all files again. And this time, I'm going to just type in Hello World. This is a little warm-up exercise for us. And I'll click Save. And you should see Hello World at the very top of the title bar. All right. So what we want to do is go to the body tag, and I'm going to add an attribute. It's going to handle an event, and we'll talk about this in the next video, and then subsequently later on we'll talk about many different events. But in this particular event, as soon as the web page loads up, we want to fire off some JavaScript. We want to execute some JavaScript code. And we're going to make it a very simple JavaScript code. All right, so to add an attribute to an element in HTML, you put the attribute name, the equal sign, and then you use double quotes or single quotes. By convention, I'm going to use double quotes for this series. Inside of the double quotes, we want to type in the word alert, open parentheses, close parentheses. Inside of the double parentheses, we want to type two single quotes, quote, quote. Inside of the single quotes, I want to type in hello world. And I'll come back to this thought in just a moment, but let's see that this works. I'm going to hit Control Save, go back to our Explorer window, and double click hello world. And a couple of things happen here. First of all, notice that I get a little error message from Internet Explorer. We'll talk about that in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and click the button that says Allow Block Content. And you can see I get a message box pops up that says hello world. Great. All right, let's come back to that little error message we saw a moment ago and get back to that by just double clicking hello world and re-executing that web page. All right, so Internet Explorer is trying to protect you, the user of this computer that you're currently working on, from potentially malicious scripts that may be running. When you run a web page from your local hard drive, it's running in elevated permissions, and therefore it has available to it more access to resources on your computer than, say, a file that was downloaded from the internet. And so Internet Explorer wants you to be aware of this and says this could be potentially harmful. Are you willing to execute script because it can access things on your hard drive that it wouldn't normally be able to if it was running from the internet? And you know, we know what we're doing here, right? We're going to be careful. We're not going to try to delete our hard drive or anything stupid like that. So in our case, I want to temporarily turn this off. If you're comfortable with turning this off for the series, awesome. If you're not, that's fine too. You'll just need to click that box every single time that we execute a JavaScript page, which kind of gets annoying after a little while. So I'm going to go back to the Tools menu, select Internet Options, and go to the Advanced tab. And I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom and then bounce up just a little bit until we get to the Security section. In Internet Explorer version 9, you'll see it's the second option, allow active content to run in files on my computer. If you're using a different version, you may have to look for this same entry in a slightly different position in this list, but you should be able to find it somewhere. Furthermore, if you're using a different vendor as a web browser, you may not even see this at all. You may not even get an error message, so just keep that in mind. All right, I'm going to click OK. Close the browser and let's test out our change one more time. And this time, as soon as we load up the web page, we see hello world. So we fixed that issue. We've written our first JavaScript code, and that, take note, that's the first way that we can embed JavaScript onto a web page by using an inline technique. We'll talk about all the techniques that we can use a little bit later, but we're going to use a second technique for now. I'm going to shut this down. I'm going to show you another way to use our template. I want to get back into Notepad. I'm going to create another web page based on our template. So I opened up an empty Notepad. I'm going to drag and drop the template into the Notepad window, and that will take the content of template and stick it into a new page. And I want to File, Save As. I'm going to go back to our folder, change Save As type to all files, and this time I want to use our naming convention, c9js_02.html. All right, so that's for channel 9 JavaScript, and this is the second lesson, the second video, so we want to use that 02, and we'll follow that convention throughout the rest of the series. Click Save. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create some additional elements on our web page. We're going to create an input box, a text box, and then also a submit button. All right, so type equals text, just normal HTML5. We'll give it an ID. And a submit button. And we're going to give it a attribute of onClick equals, double quotes, and inside here we're going to call something a little bit, but I'm going to hold off on defining that just yet. Now, previously we added some JavaScript into our body tag, but this time what I want to do is add JavaScript into the head section using a script tag. So we'll do an open and closing script. Now we do have to satisfy HTML5, use a type equal attribute to tell it what to expect inside of this script. So text / JavaScript, all one word. All right, and then inside of this script, I want to write a function. We'll talk about functions later. It's not important what it is just now, but I'm going to give this function a name of substitute. Notice that I wrote the word substitute, lowercase s. I use an open and closing curly brace immediately after the word. I'm going to use a space on my keyboard and then add a open curly brace. And then I want to add a closing curly brace, creating a couple of lines of space for me here, because I'm going to type something in here in just a moment. And then making sure that this curly brace kind of lines up with the F in function. All right, so let me get the indentation level right here. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a variable called my value. I'll talk about variables a little bit later. All right, I want to get the value of one of the elements on my web page. Which one do I want? I'm going to grab my text box. So I'm going to use single quotes inside of those double parentheses and then paste in the name my text box. In the next lines of code, I want to see and make sure that somebody actually types something into my text box before clicking the button. We'll talk about what this is doing in a little bit in the next video, but please note that that is a 0, not the letter O. I'm going to open another double curly brace, curly brace, and then a close curly brace that lines up with the I in if. And here, if somebody doesn't type in anything into the text box, then we want to alert them of that fact. And then I want to stop executing the code. Finally, I'm going to go back down to this H1 and I'm going to give it an ID. I'm going to call this title, so that I can do something like this. Okay, and I just realized that I spelled this wrong. All right, great. So take a moment, make sure that you have what I have. And let's save it one more time, and then let's double click it to see if it works. Here, I'll click it without typing anything in, and yet I don't see anything. The reason is because even though we wrote JavaScript, here, we never wired up, so we're going to have to call substitute. And I'll even add a semicolon at the end, and click save. Now let's double click it. Now let's just click the button, and we get a message box. Please enter a real value in the text box. And now when I click the Click Me button, notice that it changes the text in the header 1, the H1 tag. All right, so we were able to successfully make our application work. Now, let's suppose for a moment that something didn't work quite correctly. Let's say that you misspelled substitute. Let's just take the E off of substitute in our onClick method, and let's click save. And then let's double click our page one more time. And I'm going to type in something and click the Click Me button, and nothing happens at all. Now, depending on the web browser that you're using, you might actually see an error message, or in this case, you see no error message whatsoever, and there's no clue as to what you did wrong. So what do you do then? Well, if you run into this situation, fortunately, Internet Explorer has some built-in tools that can help get you past this problem. If you take a look in the Tools menu, you'll see that there is an F12 Developer Tools entry. You can get to this functionality by hitting the F12 or the function 12 key on your keyboard as well. So let me click that, and you'll note that a little window pops up at the very bottom of our web page. Now, depending on how it's installed on your particular desktop and whether you've used it before, you might see it pop up into a separate window. That's just its unpinned state. But I'm going to go ahead and click this little icon in the right hand corner, the pin icon, to place it back here as part of our single Internet Explorer experience. I want to go to the script tab. You see there's this little section of tabs here at the top. I'm going to click the script tab. It gives us a message over here on the right hand side to refresh the page to see messages that may have occurred before F12 tools were opened. On the left hand side we can actually see the code itself, so it'll probably point us to errors that we have in our code. So I'm going to refresh the page and click me again, and notice this time when I click the click me button it says substitute is undefined, line 25, character 1. Now we may not understand much of what's being said here in the error messages as we're getting started. However, this will point us in the right direction as to what the problem could possibly be. There's nothing called substitute without the E at the end. So that should clue me in as I scroll down to line number 25. And you can say it says character 1, however, what it's really referring to is this character here in the JavaScript. And so what we can do, I think we can even, no, we can't here. All right, so let's go to Notepad and make that change back again. Let's click Save. Let's refresh our page and click the Click Me button and then just type in some junk. And you can see it works perfectly. We don't see any error message in the console window. All right, and there's many more features of the F12 tools. We're not going to talk about all of them, just those that are pertinent to helping to debug our JavaScript code as we're writing these examples. So I tell you what, let's stop right there. We will talk about errors, and more importantly, we're going to talk about what each line of this code does in the next video. And then we're going to, in the following video after that, we're going to rewrite this whole example using a real web development tool, Visual Web Developer Express Edition, and we're going to get benefits over just using Notepad and Internet Explorer. So we have several things here to do and to kind of build off of this example that we created in this first video. Hopefully this was helpful, at least it piques your interest. Keep pushing forward. If it didn't work right for you the first time, don't sweat it. You can try and download the code and compare what I did versus what you did by looking at it in the actual file that I created versus the one that you created. You can rewind, pause the video, make sure you typed everything correctly. Making sure your environment is set up correctly is another critical step. Again, if you get stuck, make sure you ask questions and we'll try to get those answered. But if you just stay tuned and watch the next lesson, I think many things will be answered for you. Okay? So we'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you.